a few words on my background. I come from an Austrian family, but grew up in the U.S. and have been sort of going back and forth for most of my life. So I have sort of a transatlantic view of Europe and of the world. I worked for a long time for the Wall Street Journal in the US and in Europe, covering, among other things, Central and Eastern Europe. So I spent quite a lot of time in Bulgaria in the 1990s, and I've been able to sort of watch your country's evolution since then. And it is quite an impressive story on the one hand, but I also feel that it is one of the countries that maybe hasn't fully lived up to its potential, which is one of the things that I wanted to talk about today, because it seems that for Bulgaria, the more important election on Sunday is going to be the national election, because it will give you the opportunity to move beyond this sort of stagnant position that you've been in over the past couple of years, hopefully with, as you know, some very important decisions that lie ahead, in particular with the euro, which hopefully will come next year. There's also the full Schengen decision that is pending that I hope will also come sooner rather than later. But I just wanted to start maybe to sort of lay the groundwork here regarding the European economy and where it stands and how Bulgaria and Central Europe fits into this. I hope everyone can see the slides here, but you can see obviously Germany is still the biggest economy in the region, $4 trillion. These are all converted into dollars. These are 2022 numbers. It's a little bit higher now even. I think it's more about towards 4.5. You can see Bulgaria down here, which there's no number there, but as you know, it's about 100 billion. And that has, despite all of the problems, and I think this is one of the bright spots here, that the economy has continued to grow. But this is really, I like this picture because I think it sort of tells the story of Europe's real power, and it is this single market, and just the size of the market with, more than 300 million people, similar in size to the US, depending how you count it, 400 million people. So that, I think, is a reminder that Europe has this massive economic weight and potential, although it doesn't always take advantage of it maybe in the way that it could. Now, this is a little bit more of a complicated slide. I would just look at I want to use it just to look at the green part here, which is Luxembourg, and then the Bulgarian line, which is in pink. And that shows you the relative per capita GDP by country. Luxembourg is a little bit inflated. Luxembourg is the highest and is obviously inflated because they've got a very large fund business there, mutual fund business, all kinds of financial transactions that maybe artificially inflate their GDP. And then Bulgaria has obviously not risen to that level yet, which shows that there's a lot of upside potential, I would argue. And here you can see again on the growth rates since 2013. The size of the Bulgarian economy has doubled actually in recent years. And I think it's going to hit 107 billion this year. So again, despite all of the political pressures, you can see that the economy is working here. It continues to grow. I would argue, though, that you are now at a crossroads, both politically and economically. And the question is, which way are you going to go? Are you going to further embrace the West, or are you going to embrace the Russian sphere? I obviously hope that you'll continue to embrace the West, but I think there are a lot of questions outside of Bulgaria about exactly what direction the country is going to take, in particular because of views in the population about issues like the euro, which would seem to be an obvious benefit for a country like Bulgaria. And here's another slide, just quickly. Income equality is obviously quite high in Bulgaria. This is a measure of that. You want to be at zero. Zero would be complete equality. Bulgaria is in the high 30s there. I mean, nobody's at zero. But again, it's just a reminder that there are a lot of levers here that the government could pull to improve opportunities for everybody. But I want to talk a little bit about Ireland, because I think Ireland is an example of a country where Bulgaria could try to sort of steer itself in the coming years, because it was a country that had a very, very difficult economic situation for a very long time. They joined the EU much earlier than Bulgaria. Obviously, they joined the EU 50 years ago now. And some of you might remember the term Celtic tiger. This was in the 1990s when the Irish economy sort of took off. And they went through sort of a boom and bust phase for a long time. But the thing about the Irish is that, what did they do? They really embraced globalization. They opened their market, they opened their country to outside investment. They made it very attractive for foreign corporations to come in, which is why today you have Google, Microsoft, Apple, all of the biggest companies in the world have a corporate headquarters, at least in Ireland, primarily for tax reasons. But that has really boosted the Irish GDP in a substantial way. You can see there, this is a country of 5 million. They have almost 700 billion in GDP. Now, some people might say, well, this is artificially inflated because of all of the corporate money that is in there, and that's true. I'm going to come to that point in a moment. This is just by comparison, Hungary's GDP. And Hungary has also done pretty well. But I think that Hungary might be the counter example for Bulgaria. If you're at a fork in the road, you can sort of pursue the example of Ireland, or you can pursue the example of Hungary. And some countries are pursuing the example of Hungary, and you can see that it can also bring economic success. So, and by Hungary's example, I mean pursuing a more authoritarian path, and I want to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But this is what they call gross national income. It's another measure of the size of the economy that some people think is more accurate for Ireland. You can see it would be this bottom number here. This is adjusted for all kinds of special factors. It's about 273, I think that says. So, and yet still, that is much more than Hungary's gross national income. And again, I mean, Hungary joined the EU later, but it's a larger country. It's twice as large in terms of population. And here you can see the Irish unemployment, how that has evolved over the last 20, 30 years. And for Hungary, it's a similar picture. So I think you can say, well, this is why people think that what Hungary's doing is, for a lot of countries, might also be interesting. So what did Hungary do? Hungary also opened itself in a more limited way. It opened itself to the auto industry in particular. And as most of you probably know, Hungary has become kind of the workbench for the German auto industry. Pretty much every engine in an Audi or a BMW will be made, at least in part, in Hungary. The problem with that strategy, though, is that it has exposed Hungary, the Hungarian economy, to the German auto industry in a big way. It's made it hugely dependent on the German car industry. So what's happened recently is that the Hungarian economy has completely stagnated. And now it is the worst performing economy in Central and Eastern Europe. So what are they doing? What is Viktor Orban doing? He's now looking to the Chinese to come in and invest in Hungary. which is also an interesting choice. Xi Jinping just visited Budapest a couple of weeks ago, as you might have heard. He also visited Serbia. So this is sort of the club that Hungary is joining, which again will, if these deals go forward, and they haven't yet. They made some vague announcements about some rail projects and so, but nothing has actually been signed with the Chinese, but I expect at some point it will. But what happens when the Chinese move in is that they move not just into the economic sector, they really try to influence a lot of other aspects of the countries in which they invest. One example of that is in Serbia, where they have helped install facial recognition software across Belgrade to help the Serbian police better to monitor protests and that kind of thing, which is exactly the kind of thing that Viktor Orban would probably want, because now we're seeing massive protests in Hungary again, the largest protests I think in a decade, and the reason is not so much because of his stance towards the EU, but it is because of these economic issues, because inflation has also gone up quite a lot. It reached over 17% last year. So this is also an interesting difference. You've got Hungary, not in the EU, not in the euro, rather, they didn't want to join the euro for all kinds of nationalistic reasons. They're dealing with inflation of over 17%. And then you've got Ireland, which has obviously joined the EU, and the euro is in a much more stable position. Here's the Bulgarian GDP, as I discussed earlier, just as an example. And why do I bring this up? Because I think that for foreign investors in particular, what are they looking for? They're looking for stability. When foreign investors come into a country, they want political stability, they want sort of economic stability, and they want the rule of law, which is a really crucial factor. And I think that explains why Ireland has managed to do so well. Now, some people would say, well, Ireland has these other advantages, its proximity to the UK, which is true. The fact that they use English as their language is also a factor. But we've seen other countries, even countries where English is not the mother tongue, adopt English as the business language. If you look at Singapore, for example, and they've managed to do quite well there. So I think that that Ireland remains kind of the gold standard in Europe for this approach of a small economy opening itself up to the world, drawing in huge amounts of foreign investment in a way that has really transformed the society, fundamentally transformed the society. If you go to Ireland today, and I have had the good fortune of having seen it when it was poor and seeing it today, and it is really night and day. So it shows again, that these processes, they do work if you give them time, if you stick to a clear path and don't deviate from it. Now, some countries do deviate from it, and we're seeing that in Hungary, which, as I said before, is now stagnating. And how did Hungary deviate from it? Well, in 2010, Viktor Orban, who had been a reformer, who had been very much a liberal, came back to power and took, as we know, an authoritarian turn. And this appeals to some people because they feel that he's standing up for Hungary, he's standing up for Christian values, as he said. But I don't think that anybody can look at what's happened in Hungary objectively and not conclude that the system has become completely corrupt. He has established an oligarchic system similar to what we've seen elsewhere in Eastern Europe, in Russia and Ukraine, where his cronies benefit and everything is sort of done under the table, and he's continuing to hold the European Union hostage on various fronts, and there's this constant sort of tug of war between Orban and the EU over rule of law, and it's given Hungary, unfortunately, a very bad reputation. That doesn't mean that companies aren't still investing in there, but most of those companies are the companies who were already there, in particular the German auto industry, as I said. And why are they doing it? They're doing it because they've got already a massive installed base. They already had such deep roots in Hungary that it's difficult for them to get out, and they have the proximity, obviously. This is from the Freedom House. I don't know if people here are familiar with Freedom House. They do an annual survey, a report card of freedoms across the world by country. And they score them from 0 to 100. 100 is the highest. Here's Hungary at 65, which is at the lower end for a European country, which means that it is still considered to be free, but it's sort of on a downward trend. Ireland, look at this, is at 97. And I think that also, because the Freedom House rating is seen by a lot of people as the gold standard for judging, a country's governance and the sort of state of its democracy, this is a pretty impressive result, and it's much higher than, say, the United States, for example, which I think is now at 85. Here's Bulgaria at 78, which is better than some, but worse than a lot of others. I think if you look at the neighborhood, I think what would concern me about the way things are, the trajectory that Bulgaria might be on here, depending on what happens after this election, is that you are in a kind of dangerous neighborhood here, right? So you're part of the Balkans, obviously, and you have all of the Western Balkan countries, which are not, democratically speaking, particularly free on a Western scale anyway. Which, again, just from the perspective of foreign investors, if you're looking where to put your money, where are you going to open your next factory, you look at a place like Albania, you might think twice about it. It might be okay for Donald Trump's son-in-law to come in and build a big hotel on the beach and that kind of thing in order to draw in all of the Russian oligarchs. But if you're looking for really long-term investment that's going to create well-paying jobs, factories, and so forth, there might be other options. Not to put too fine a point on it, but you're also close to Russia and Turkey. So, I think this is a very delicate time in the region, not just for Bulgaria. And you can see again an example of how quickly things can change in a country in Slovakia, which I think is another interesting comparison with, which is right here. That was just to show you how good my geography is. But Slovakia is a country that used to be a star performer in Europe, and a lot of sort of Western economists were saying, Slovakia has really turned itself around. They introduced a flat tax. And you saw a lot of foreign investment go in there. Again, a lot of car companies invested heavily in Slovakia, which benefited from the proximity to Germany. If any of you have a Porsche Cayenne, for example, all of the Porsche Cayennes are effectively made in Bratislava. And then they're put on a train and shipped up to Leipzig in Germany, where they're screwed together. And then the Germans can say that they're made in Germany, but they're actually made in Bratislava. What's happened in Slovakia recently is that because of the populism that has taken hold of the country there, the influence of the Russian propaganda, which you've also seen here in Bulgaria, they re-elected Robert Fico, whom, as you know, was recently and tragically shot. But Fico is he is a former communist and is on the left side of the political spectrum. He identifies himself as a social democrat. which is, it was just interesting because he's very similar to Viktor Orban, in fact, and Viktor Orban has always identified himself as more of a conservative, but you can see that, that there's sort of this horseshoe effect here where when it comes to populism, the differences are really, the traditional differences are really blurred. And what did Fico do? Well, he was forced out of power some years ago after the killing of a journalist, a colleague of mine, Jan Kuciak, who also worked for Axel Springer. And there were massive street protests that forced Fico out of office. But I think most people would say with the help of this Russian propaganda that most of the population in Slovakia is subjected to every day, because their main sources of information are RT, the Russia Today, Sputnik, and this type of thing in Slovakian, they have very negative views of the West, very negative views of the European Union, very negative views of NATO, which they blame for everything that has happened in Ukraine, and in particular, very negative views of the United States, which is interesting because Slovakia is a country that has really benefited enormously from its membership in the Euro, from its membership in the European Union. So my advice to Bulgarians before you go to vote is that you really need to look at these other examples to see how easy it is for a country to tip from a very stable path onto a path that is a little bit more shaky. And it also, with this rise of populism, you can see how it just completely polarizes the political debates to the point that, this poet, I guess he was, tried to assassinate Fico. Now that might have happened anyway. He might be crazy or whatever. But I think when you talk to people in Slovakia, no one was surprised that this happened because the entire climate has become so charged. So how do you avoid that? I think you avoid that by having honest discussions with people and trying to filter out better the Russian propaganda that is bombarding social media. And I know that the previous government started an initiative to do that, a fact-checking initiative, but there really needs to be substantial investment in that to educate people better, because I think that when people have the actual facts, they make better decisions. Obviously, that sounds obvious, but it's worth repeating. So just to conclude, I really think that for the continued success of Bulgaria, and we've seen all of the potential that Bulgaria has had, I've seen it with my own eyes over the past 30 years, you really need to focus on stability, political stability, and the rule of law, because you want to lose this reputation as a country that is holding elections every couple of months, that is swinging from one sort of end of the spectrum to the other, because even though you've put in a lot of policies that would attract foreign investment and foreign interest, in particular the tax regime, which is basically at the same level as Hungary and Ireland, to go back to that comparison of about 10%, it's not really that well known, I feel, in sort of Western corporate circles, that Bulgaria would be a good option. And you obviously have a lot of natural advantages. You've got the coast, you've got the infrastructure. It's a very well-educated population. And these are the kinds of things I think that would naturally draw in foreign investment and foreign interest to help take Bulgaria to the next level economically, as it were, and maybe also prevent the brain drain that we've seen over the past 20 years that has been quite insidious. So I'm gonna stop there. But if you don't have any questions, I will leave it there. My message to you, though, is that Bulgaria really is one of the hidden champions of Europe, and I think people just need to be a little bit more confident about the country's prospects, and I hope that you take a first step in that direction this weekend at the ballot box. Thank you very much for your time and attention.